Hi and welcome to another carpenter tutoring tutorial. I'm Amy and my job is to help you work smarter, not harder, so you can get through your work more quickly and easily. Today we're going to talk about ways that you can use the values of a, b, and c in the standard form of a quadratic equation to help you start to anticipate what signs you should expect for your magic numbers. Now, if you hear me talking about magic numbers and you have no idea what that means, I invite you to check out my video on using the magic numbers method to factor quadratic equations. But as a super quick review, magic numbers are two numbers that have to multiply together to the value of a times c and add together to the value of b in the standard form of your equation. For ease of communication, I usually refer to my magic numbers as w and z when I don't know them yet. And so that means we need two numbers, w and z, that multiply to the same thing as a times c, and that add together to the value of b. Now there are a couple things that we can tell based on the product of w and z and the sum of w and z. We're going to start with the product and then we'll use the additional information we get from the sum to give us a complete understanding of the signs of the magic numbers we expect to use. So first, w times z. Its product can only have two possible outcomes. It can be a positive product or a negative product. That's because when I multiply two numbers together, if they share the same sign, so positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, that will always yield a positive product. On the flip side, if I have mixed signs, that's always going to yield a negative product. And so we can use the sign of the product of w and z to tell us something about w and z's signs. So if w have the same sign. If w and z multiply together to give us a negative product, that tells us that w and z have different signs. What we don't know at this point is what those signs are or which magic number has which sign. This is where the value of b comes in. Let's jump back up to the top scenario where we have the product of w and z as a positive number. From this point, we have two possible values for b. If our b term, or the sum of w and z, is positive, that tells us that both w and z are positive. That's because if they share the same sign, which we know from their product, the only way I can add two numbers with the same sign together and end up with a positive result is if both of those numbers were positive to begin with. On the flip side, if w and z add together to a negative number, that tells us that both w and z are negative. Now, things get a little bit trickier when we switch down to the bottom scenario where the product of w and z is negative, but it's still really helpful. If the product of w and z is negative, but the sum of w and z is positive, that tells us that the magic number, and I'll use mn as a shorthand, the magic number further from zero when we're considering our factors is positive. On the flip side, if w and z yield a negative product, but w plus z yields a negative sum, that tells us that the magic number further from zero must be negative. Another way of thinking about this is that the sign of whichever of your factors is larger, further away from zero, is going to match the sign on the term b in your original equation. This one's a little bit funky to think about in the abstract, so let's take a look at an example. Let's say that we have a situation where we have a starting equation where the a value is 3, the b value is -2, and the c value is -5. This tells me off the bat that I am looking for magic numbers that multiply to the same thing as a times c, which in this case would be 3 times -5, or -15. From this point, I have to consider factors of negative 15 that could add to negative 2. As I build my factor chart, I don't know which of my factors should be the positive one and which one should be the negative one. I know I need one of each, but I don't know which way they should go. This is where the sign of b can help us out. If I know that I have a negative product and I also know that I have a negative sum for b, that tells me that the factor I'm considering that's further away from 0 has to be the one that's negative. So if we think about factors of 15, I could think about 1 and 15. Based on what we just established, the one further away from 0 has to be the negative one. 15 is further away from 0, so it has to be the negative one. But when I add these together, they don't give us the negative 2 we need, so I know those aren't my magic numbers. I could also consider the factor pair of 3 and 5. Again, 5 is further away from 0 than 3 is, so 5 must have the negative sign. And now when I add these together, it does match the negative 2 that we're looking for. With an example like this, where we have relatively few factor pairs to consider, we only had 2 for negative 15. Thinking through it this way doesn't really make a huge difference, but imagine that you were considering the factor pairs of negative 120. There are a lot more pairs there, and if you didn't use the sign of b to help you anticipate the signs of your factors and magic numbers, you would have to check twice as many pairs. One where, for example, the 5 is negative and the 3 is positive, but also the reverse, where the 3 is negative and the 5 is positive. So when we're working with really large numbers that have lots of factor pairs, using the value and the sign of b to help anticipate your outcome can really reduce the amount of time it takes you to complete that problem. Another benefit to this process is sometimes it's really nice to have a way to check our work. And if you use this process, you can always double check that the signs of your magic numbers come out to be what you expect. So it's a little built-in double check to check your progress along the way. As always, I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If there are any other topics you'd like to see covered or equations you'd like to see worked through, please leave a comment down below. And otherwise, I'll catch you next time.